Welcome to TYT Interviews. We've got a great guest for you guys today. Cenk Anderson, former Salt Lake City mayor and current presidential candidate for the Justice Party. Cenk, great to have you on the program. And as you can tell, I enjoy not only your policy positions, but the name of your party.
Well, thank you, Cenk. And I appreciate you helping us get the word out, because this is how we're going to change this nation, and it's such a good thing for our democracy.
So let's get started first with your background, because a lot of people might not be familiar with it. And the first question that jumps to people's mind is, how did this guy who is incredibly progressive become the mayor and the popular mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah?
Well, Salt Lake City actually is quite a progressive city in the midst of an extremely conservative state. And by conservative, I mean tied into the status quo, very, very Republican. And my base of support were the kind of people that would do anything to make certain that they have some representation in government, because they certainly don't see it on the state level here in Utah. So I served 8 years as mayor. We were able to get a lot of good work done in the area of good urban planning and design, mass transit. We've got a great transit system now. I had a massive climate change program that we went national and international with the kinds of successes that we had. We reduced greenhouse gas emissions in city operations by 31% in 3 years, demonstrating this can be done anywhere. So it was a really good 8 years. We expanded vastly the diversity in city government. We fought against these insane laws like the state English-only law. We were actually successful in fighting against that, and I think demonstrated what real leadership can bring about. And then, of course, I was very active in calling for President Bush's impeachment and in my opposition to the disastrous invasion and occupation of Iraq.
So what was your popularity rating when you left office?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. It was quite high. Obviously, after 8 years and taking a lot of the stands that I took, you shave off some of your support over time, but I felt comfortable that I could have won a third term if I'd run for re-election, but I decided instead to start up and run a human rights advocacy and education organization, High Road for Human Rights.
So now, why make the decision to run for president? Obviously, it's a very, very long shot in a third party and one that's recently formed. Why did you feel compelled to do that?
Because I see nothing better than a continuation of the status quo and a worsening of conditions over time, both in terms of our international relations and also on the domestic side. And you realize that whether the Democrats or the Republicans are elected, we're simply moving the players around inside this very corrupt, perverse system where the corrupting influence of money ends up calling the shots in Washington every single day. We do live now in a plutocracy, control of government by the wealthy. And it shows up in two very dangerous ways. We have a two-tiered economic system with the greatest disparity in wealth and income than at any time since the 1920s. We are in the midst of a new Gilded Age, where this elite, small group of people is just simply becoming wealthier and wealthier, while everyone else is barely hanging on. And a corollary to that on the justice side is that we have a two-tiered system of justice now, where the law is applied oftentimes with a vengeance against just about everybody except for the rich and powerful, who seem to be able to get away with their massive felonies, whether it's the Wall Street felons who committed such massive fraud, helping lead to the economic meltdown, or war criminals and those who engaged in felonious surveillance of American citizens' communications. It was bad enough under Bush when these things were going on, but then to see President Obama come into office and basically wave off these major offenses against the law, saying, well, let's just look forward and not backwards, essentially ending any concept of the rule of law in this country. It's an extremely dangerous time where the very foundations of our republic are being undermined, where constitutional principles of separation of power and checks and balances is dismissively being set aside as the executive branch, which is a perpetrator of so many of these offenses, is able to go in when challenged in the courts and get the courts to dismiss these cases on the grounds of the state secrets doctrine.
Right.
So I couldn't stand by and watch all of this without taking an active stand. And as much as I resisted either the formation of a new party or myself throwing myself into this electoral mess, I decided we really don't have any other option. And it's not that I want to see the worst of the two evils elected, as people like to talk about it all, but Cenk, we will never see a change in the system unless we can say during an election that we're all going to do everything we can to change the system, to tell the Republicans and Democrats they've had their chance. They cannot take us for granted any longer. And those of us who, out of conscience, feel like there's got to be a major change, we've got to stand up and call for it, even if it means that we may not win this election, and even if it means that somebody other than our top choice might get elected in the short term. In the long term, we've got to be able to draw that line, each and every one of us.
So, Rocky, I want to come back to the spoiler issue in a second, but you brought up two things that I want to discuss there. One, this idea that the upper class is not subject to the same laws. It's obvious. In fact, a great example of it is happening now, where Romney seems to have committed a felony by signing contradictory federal forms. Well, you can't lie on federal forms, as you could be punished up to 5 years in prison. But without disproving that at all, the establishment media says, well, obviously you can't call him a criminal. I don't know what the obvious part of it is. They just seem to assume, since he's Mitt Romney and since he's an established part of the upper class, by definition, it couldn't possibly be a felony. In fact, they browbeat the Obama campaign team that would dare to suggest such a thing. Don't you know, crime is for lower and middle classes. That's who we lock up these days. So I hear you on that. But then you've got this great irony that you don't have the same kind of resources they do because they're willing to take bribes, which means that you have almost, honestly, no chance of winning because this media won't talk about you. You can't buy ads. How do you overcome that?
Well, I think getting the media that we can. I've actually, I think, been able to get out as much as any third party ever has in the national media, and thanks to people like you, frankly, who have helped us get the word out. Also, we've never had the social media access, that democratized means of communication before to the extent that we have it now in this country. And I find great inspiration from what we saw during the Arab Spring, with people coming together who wanted to overthrow their dictatorships. They organized at the grassroots level. They utilized that democratized means of communication, and many of them had to put their lives on the line to do it, but they were able to overthrow their dictatorships. We can do the same thing in this country if we have the will. And it's going to take for people to get up off their couches and become active and help spread the message and join this movement for real change. They cannot be lulled into sleep anymore by these ads that these folks who want to buy their way in Washington are paying for these candidates. we've got to have an engaged citizenry. That's our only protection against this plutocracy and the undermining of our republic. And it can be done. I'm optimistic, and it may not happen in this race, but this is a good time to start this kind of a mass people's movement.
How do you start that fire? Because I talked to you on our current television show a couple of months ago, and you were talking about social media, but it doesn't just happen by itself, and so far it hasn't caught on the kind of fire that you would want to, where there's a serious discussion about independent candidates such as yourself. So what are you doing? What is the process by which you're trying to get the word out so that it'll take off like it did in Egypt, et cetera?
Well, we're doing all we can through every means of social media, and you're right, it hasn't taken off. We'd love for it all to go constantly viral, and if we can get people's attention, and we're doing all that we can on Twitter, on Facebook, through our website, through email campaigns, and we really urge people, take a look at our website, voterocky.org. Be in touch with us. Let us get your contact information so that we can email you, so that you can then spread the word, because this is all about networking. But, even if it's not our campaign doing this, a lot of this is just simply happening. There are more people now registered as independents than as either Republicans or Democrats. Millions of people are leaving the Democratic and Republican parties. The polls show repeatedly that the majority of people in this country want to see a third party or independent candidate for president. And then, of course, there are the historic low approval ratings of Congress. I think all of that spells a perfect storm toward blowing away this political duopoly and creating a path for a new party and a new way in this country.
Yeah, no, you know what? I agree with you on independence, no question. They're tired of the Democrats and the Republicans. They're, in fact, tired of this campaign because they don't believe that either side is going to bring any real change. The problem is the old media, and the old media will not discuss the third-party candidates at all. They don't want another possibility. They just they're part of the establishment, so they just want to keep the establishment going. But Rocky, if you were to become president, I'm curious as to how you would handle some things. Reading an interesting book about how President Obama came in idealistic on some issues and then was disabused of that and decided to go along with the establishment view on, for example, kill lists. And so his national security advisors pull him aside and they say, hey, listen, you don't understand. We have to do these signature strikes where we're not entirely sure who we're killing. Apparently, he became convinced of that for reasons I can't quite comprehend. But there's all this pressure, and that part is fair. It's true. There's by the Defense Department, by everybody who's already working in the government, et cetera. If you were president and they came to you and said, hey, look, these drone strikes take out important terrorists who are looking to kill American citizens, what do you do?
I would say that it cannot be done as indiscriminately as it's been done, and we can't lie to the American people about it. He has admitted, his administration has admitted, they have deceived the people of this country by counting any male that is of military age as a, quote, militant, and that's how they've reported it. So they could be killing hundreds of innocent people, and yet it never shows up. The American people have been completely misled. We know that the drone strikes have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of men, women, and children, innocent civilians, in Pakistan alone. Now, the long-term security implications, yeah, it's great to take out a few people, suspected terrorists, people that are plotting to hurt Americans, but look at the long-term security implications with a country that has nuclear weapons. We're turning the people of Pakistan against us. They hate us. They despise us because of what we've been doing, first of all, in Afghanistan and now in their own nation.
So, Rocky, obviously, as I've already said, I agree with a lot of your policy positions. And so, we do a perspective program here. I have no qualms saying I'm rooting for you. But that being said, the very legitimate question comes up of the spoiler issue, which is, listen, you know, if I thought you were going to win, God bless, that would be terrific. But what if we take a couple of votes away in a couple of important swing states? It swings the election towards Romney, who is, you know, the perfect representative of the establishment, Wall Street, and all the things that we are fighting against. How do you answer that?
Well, there are 3 points, basically. First of all, in every election, you're going to have somebody that's considered the lesser of the two evils. There's always going to be a difference. So is that going to trump in every instance any move toward real change? Because a vote for either one of them is a vote for the continuation of the status quo, a continuation for this rotten, corrupt system we have in Washington. So I think we just need to make that leap and say, we're going to do this as a signal of how important it is to all of us to change the system. Secondly, President Obama isn't just the lesser of two evils, and if he is in fact the lesser of two evils, he's the most effective of the two evils, because he is getting away with horrendous violations of civil and human rights that no Republican president would be able to get away with. And it's because he's a Democrat, and when he does it, then that shuts the Democratic Party and its members down from raising any opposition. So we're basically living in a nation now where the two major political parties don't utter a peep when our president is targeting U.S. citizens for assassination, engaging in these indiscriminate drone strikes, signing off on legislation allowing for the indefinite detention even of U.S. citizens without charges, trial, right of habeas corpus, or legal assistance, which I think, by the way, is the most anti-American subversive act ever by a president of the United States and our Congress. If that were done by a Republican, the Democrats would be raising holy hell about it. So this president is able to quash that kind of opposition. Can you imagine if it was Bush, Rumsfeld, and Cheney in the Oval Office looking at these baseball card-like biographies of suspected terrorists and deciding who's going to live and who's going to die, knowing that there were going to be hundreds of innocent civilians killed in the process? You don't think the Democrats in Congress would be issuing congressional subpoenas? You don't think there would be people in the streets, that there would be demonstrations, that there would be calls for impeachment? But as it is, since it's a Democrat, then there's nothing said in opposition except for the few of us that are doing the kinds of things that I am doing and that are reporting like you are. But by and large, this country has been completely silent and hence complicit in these kinds of civil rights and human rights violations. So we all need to stand up, and that goes to my third point in terms of the spoiler argument, and that is when it comes down to us, each and of us go in to cast our ballots, we have got to be able to draw the line and say there is finally a point beyond which I will not go. And if there's somebody running for president, for election or re-election, who would engage in the kinds of things that we know that Mitt Romney is advocating and that Obama has already done, we've got to be able to say no. I want to look back later in life and say, I did not support this kind of conduct by our nation's leader.
All right, Rocky Anderson, fighting the good fight, presidential candidate for the Justice Party. And, you know, no matter what you think of the possibility of success of that fight, I think you've got to appreciate the fact that somebody is willing to engage in it. So, Rocky, thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you a lot, Cenk. Great talking to you.